Hey guys, welcome to another Ornament Girl tutorial. This one is very quick and easy. It might be one of the quickest and easiest of all the ornaments that we have done on this channel. We're calling them rapid wraps, and this ornament is perfect for using fussy cuts, even ones that might be a little bit too big for our regular snow globe ornaments. You can literally take any image and just pop it onto the face of a cube, and then we're going to wrap the edges with fabric or ribbon, and I'm actually going to show you a couple different ideas for that here in just a second. Or you can make your own little scene like what we've done here. This is just plain red fabric, and we stuck on a wooden snowman button. This is rickrack across the bottom to look like snow, and then these are little snowflake sequins pinned on with beads. And then this snowflake here is actually just made out of individual little sequins. Super simple and really fun. And then how cute is this? A little fussy cut of a house and then strips of ribbon to look like window panes. The possibilities are totally endless. Let's talk about the basic supplies that you'll need to make this. First, you'll need a soft foam cube. This is 3 inches by 3 inches by 2 inches wide. You'll need about 50 straight pins. You'll need whatever embellishments that you want to decorate with. So beads, charms, buttons, anything that you want. I'm going to be keeping it simple today. I'm just going to be putting a bow on mine, and so I'm using narrow ribbon. These are both about 3/8 inch. 1/4 to 3/8 inch works really well. And then of course you're going to need your fabric. You'll need 2 squares of your focal fabric, 1 for each side of the cube. And guys, we've made you a printable supply list which has all the fabric cuts that you need, including the sizes. You'll find a link to that right below this video. Now the next fabric that you're going to need is for the bands, and this can vary depending on what you decide to do for yours, but I'm going to be doing something similar to what we did here. This is one main band. It's this fabric here in the center that's going to cover the whole edge of the cube, and then I'm going to do 2 narrow bands along the edges. You don't have to do this. You could do something more like this one. I did 1 big band around here, and then instead of doing the 2 side bands, I just did 1 center band. Okay, so the main band is the wide band right here, the 3 inch by 13 inch strip, and then the accent bands will be these narrow bands. So you could use 1 or 2 or none if you wanted. You could even use ribbon. This is a really wide, almost 3 inch wide velvet ribbon, and that's perfect. It looks so pretty. On this one, this is actually a ribbon inside, but then 2 narrow bands on the edges. And then one more quick idea, because there's just so many. This is the main band here in the center, this white printed fabric. We did 2 red narrow bands, but then on top of that, we did this white trim. All right, so let me show you. Honestly, it's probably gonna take me less time to show you than it did just for me to intro. Start with your first square of focal fabric and place it face down in front of you, and then just center your foam cube on top. Lift the whole thing up together, and if you need to, depending on what fabric you have here, just make sure that it looks centered along all the edges. This fabric seems to be made for this size of cube. And then once you've got everything where you want it, go ahead and start pinning around the edges. About 3 pins on each side. Make sure that you pin so that your pin is either going straight in or even in towards the middle a little bit, so that you don't poke yourself out through the face of the cube. I'm gonna do 3 pins on each side, but it's kind of easier to get the whole thing held down in place first with 1 pin on each side. Okay, so now it's held down. I'm just gonna go ahead and place a few more pins on each side. Okay, so now I've got this, and I've got these little corners hanging out. We're just gonna take care of those by tucking them to the sides, just as if you were wrapping a present. It doesn't matter which direction you go, but you do wanna be consistent on both sides and then also on the other half. So I think I'm gonna go side to side like this. So that's my left side, and I'll do the same thing over here. All right, there's side 1. I'm just gonna flip this over and do the same thing on side 2. Just be careful that whatever side is the top on side 1, you make sure it's the top over here on side 2. Okay, side 2 covered, and I'm just gonna make sure that I point my corners in the same direction I did on side 1. We're already halfway done, guys. Now take your wide band and flip it over so the good side is faced away from you, and we're gonna fold in the 2 sides lengthwise, and we want our final width to be the width of the cube, which this cube is 2 inches. So when I fold these sides in, I want it so that I have a 2 inch wide band. This is where, if you feel like ironing, once you get this the correct width, that would be totally fine. I'm not gonna iron, I'm just gonna wing it here. I'm starting at the top center, and now I'm just gonna adjust my folds so that this basically just covers the width of the cube. Once I get it held down, I can kind of perfect the edges a little bit. Okay, so I've got it held down, and now I'm just going to continue to fold and wrap it around the cube, making sure that I cover it all the way to the edges. And you can pin as you go, which I'm going to do because I just can't seem to hold this folded as I go. But think about where you're going to be doing your accent bands. If you're going to be doing an accent band down the center like I did here, then you can use holder pins right down the center because you'll be covering it up with that accent band. If you're going to be doing them on the sides like here, then you'll want to pin along the outside edges. So I'm going to go ahead and stick a pin on the edges of this side of the cube. That's going to help hold that down. Continue wrapping. Okay, so I've just come back to my top, my starting point. And I need to end the band right there at my starting point, but I don't want there to be a raw edge where I cut off that fabric. So what I'm gonna do is what we like to call the hidden pin trick. I'm gonna hold down this fabric with some temporary pins. I just pinned in a couple spots to hold it there. And then I wanna cut off the excess here to about maybe 3/4 of an inch, 5/8 of an inch or so past my starting point. So I'm gonna snip off about right here and then just take the end and flip it under itself so that you have a folded edge going straight across. Let me straighten mine out just a little bit. And then it should be sitting right above or right on top of your starting point. Now we want to pin this down. And on this band, you can actually go ahead and just stick your pins right wherever your accent bands are going to be if you're going to have them. So I'm just sticking a pin here along this side and then over here, just like I did along all the other sides. So this wasn't actually the hidden pin trick just yet, but I'm going to show you that next. So that's band 1. I'm going to go ahead and add my 2 accent bands. You can use a different fabric for this. I'm actually going to be using the same fabric as my main band. And we're going to fold it the same way, except that you don't have to be as exact about the width because we're not needing to cover any foam anymore. I'm just going to make this pretty narrow. I want it to be about 1/2 of an inch wide by the time that I'm done. So I fold it in the 2 sides lengthwise the same way I did with that wide band. Flip it over. Let me just check my width here. And yeah, I'm right around 1/2 of an inch. You don't have to be exact about that though. And I'm going to start where I started the main band, right up at the top, except for that it's not centered. I'm doing it along a side, along an edge. Just sticking one pin there at the top to hold it in place. And I'm going to do exactly as before, just wrapping this around. I'm not going to stick any pins along the edges though this time because there's not going to be anything else covering it. Okay, I've arrived at my starting point. Now I'm going to do the hidden pin trick, starting the same way as I did with the main band, just sticking a temporary pin up there to hold it in place. I'm going to cut off my excess so that it only extends about 5/8 of an inch or so past my starting point. And then I'm going to flip the end under itself like that. Now this time, because I don't want these pins to show, I'm going to stick a pin. This may be hard to see. Let me zoom in a little bit. See how I have this little lip where I folded the end of it under itself? I'm going to nudge my pin right up inside that little lip and push it down in. Be careful you don't push it out the side of your cube and poke yourself. And you can see how it buckled up the fabric a little bit, and I can see my pin head. You can just nudge the pin or the fabric right up over top of that pin head and it hides it. So now that is hidden. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side of the band. Push that down in, easy peasy. By the way, if you're just doing one accent band, and especially if you're putting a bow up on top, then you're not going to need to bother with that hidden pin trick. You can just pin that band up there and whatever raw edges you have will get covered up by your bow. Okay, I'm going to do one more band on the other side. All right, both my accent bands are done. I'm actually going to do one additional thing here before I make the bow. I'm going to stick a piece of this red glittery ribbon right down the center between those 2 bands. Just pinning it at the top and wrapping it around just like I did with the bands, except that I don't have to do any folding. Pretty easy. How pretty is that? I'm going to do a simple bow for the top. And I'm going to use the gift bow style that we have. We actually have a separate tutorial for that, so I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, but really quick, a quick summary of how to do this. I've started with two 13-inch pieces of ribbon, and I'm going to put the ends together and cut them in half where the fold is. And now for each one, I'm going to fold it in half again, but I'm not going to cut it this time. Instead, I'm going to pin through the center where I folded it, and I'm pinning down through the pretty part of the ribbon. And I'm going to do that for each of my two different kinds of ribbons that I have here. So all four of those cut pieces are on my pin, and now one by one, I'm going to fold each one back and pin through the end, forming a loop. And I'm just going to alternate my two colors that I have. Well, I guess I have the same color, but my two textures of ribbon. Once all of them are pinned, you'll have a pretty bow. I don't know how I got mine so uneven. We'll pretend that it looks perfect. And then just pin that right down on top. And then you'll repeat it 1 or 2 more times for however big of a bow that you want. And if you want it to look tiered, if you want the bottom part of your bow to be a little bit bigger loops than the next tier, then just cut 12-inch pieces instead of 13 like we did here. So for this bow, I started with 12-inch strips, and I started with a beaded pin. I just stuck a crystal bead on there to make it a little bit prettier. If you want this to hang, then you can also add a little hanger right here at the top. Otherwise, this can just be a sit about. And look how cute that is. Honestly, it's absolutely beautiful, and it took what, like 10 minutes? That's ridiculous. I hope that you guys love making this. I hope you love the idea, and then you come up with all kinds of creative ways to make these really unique. Don't forget that we've got a printable supply list for you right below. And if you have any questions, please make sure to put them in the comments. Thanks so much for watching.